The night the millionaire came home early was the night everything began to change, but no one knew it yet. At exactly 7:42 p.m., a black luxury car rolled silently through the iron gates of a mansion that most people only saw in magazines. Inside that house lived a man who owned cities on paper and power in boardrooms, yet felt like a stranger in his own home. Julian Ashford had built an empire from nothing, but success had taken something from him in return. It had taken warmth. It had taken time. And slowly, without him noticing, it had taken his daughter's childhood. Upstairs, in a quiet room filled with soft lamps and carefully chosen furniture, 12-year-old Alina sat on the edge of her bed, gripping the arms of her wheelchair. Her legs had never been strong enough to hold her weight for more than moments. Doctors had used careful words, limitations, long-term, manage expectations. Julian had nodded, signed checks, and buried the rest of his feelings under meetings and numbers. But tonight was different. In the hallway, a soft laugh echoed, something Julian hadn't heard in years. He stopped walking. From behind a half-open door, he saw a sight that made his breath catch. A young woman in a simple uniform knelt on the carpet, her shoes set aside, her hands open like she was offering trust itself. In front of her, Alina was standing. Shaking. Struggling. But standing. "Just one more second," the maid whispered gently. "You're doing it. I'm right here." Alina's face was flushed, her arms trembling as she tried to balance without support. Every instinct in Julian screamed that she would fall. He almost rushed forward, almost broke the moment. Then Alina smiled. It wasn't a careful smile. It wasn't polite or practiced. It was bright, fearless, and full of something Julian hadn't seen in his daughter before. Belief. And in that single fragile second, Julian realized something terrifying and beautiful at the same time. While he had been conquering the world, someone else had been teaching his daughter how to stand. Julian didn't step into the room right away. He stood frozen in the hallway, afraid that even his breath might shatter what he was seeing. Alina's knees trembled, her small hands stretched outward, and the maid's eyes never left her face, not once. There was no fear in those eyes, only patience. Deep, steady patience. 5, 3, the maid counted softly. Alina laughed as her legs finally gave in, sinking gently back into the chair. She wasn't disappointed. She was proud. "I beat yesterday," she said, chest rising with excitement. "I stood longer." The maid clapped quietly as if celebrating a miracle meant keeping it safe. "You did. And tomorrow you'll beat today." Julian felt something crack inside him. He had paid for the best specialists, the newest equipment, the rarest treatments flown in from across the world. Yet no one had ever spoken to his daughter like that, not with confidence, not with certainty, not with belief that didn't cost anything. "That's enough for tonight," the maid said, carefully placing a blanket over Alina's legs. "Your muscles worked hard. Will you be here in the morning?" Alina asked, suddenly serious. "Every morning," the maid replied without hesitation. That's when Julian stepped forward. Both of them startled. Alina's eyes widened. "Dad." The maid stood quickly, smoothing her uniform, her posture tense. "Sir, I was just helping her stretch. I hope I didn't overstep." Julian looked at his daughter first. Really looked at her. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright, her posture different somehow, stronger. "How long have you been doing this?" he asked, his voice quieter than he expected. The maid hesitated. "A few months. Only when she wants to. Only when she feels brave." Alina reached for Julian's hand. "She doesn't give up on me," she said simply. "Even when I want to." Those words hit harder than any accusation ever could. Julian nodded slowly, the weight of an unspoken truth settling over him. For the first time, he understood that progress didn't always come from power or money. Sometimes it came from someone who stayed. Julian didn't sleep that night. He sat in his study long after the lights across the city went dark, replaying the image of his daughter standing on her own, the way her smile had carried more strength than any report he had ever read. At dawn, instead of leaving for the office, he stayed. It felt unfamiliar, almost wrong, like breaking a rule he'd lived by for years. When Alina's door opened that morning, the maid was already there, moving quietly, preparing breakfast with careful precision. She didn't expect Julian to be watching. "You don't have to do this every day," Alina said softly, swinging her legs as best she could. "I know it's hard." The maid smiled. "Some things are worth being tired for." Julian stepped closer. "Where did you learn how to work with her like that?" The maid paused, then spoke honestly. "My younger brother was born with weak legs. We didn't have specialists. We had hope and a lot of trial and error. I learned by listening to him. Alina looked up at her with admiration. You're my hero. The maid blinked, surprised, and laughed quietly. I'm just someone who believes you can do more than you think. Julian felt the words settle deeply inside him. He had built systems, hired experts, and trusted data, but he had never truly trusted belief. Do you think she'll ever walk? He asked, careful not to sound desperate. The maid didn't answer immediately. She crouched in front of Alina and met her eyes. I think she'll surprise us. That wasn't a promise. It was something better. Julian watched as they practiced again. Slow movements, careful breathing, encouragement whispered instead of rushed commands. He noticed how Alina stood taller each time, not just physically but inside. For the first time since his wife had passed, Julian felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Hope, quiet, patient, and finally alive. Change didn't arrive loudly. It slipped into the mansion in small, almost invisible ways. Julian began having breakfast at home. At first, he sat silently, pretending to read emails while stealing glances at his daughter. Alina noticed, of course. Children always do. She straightened her shoulders when she practiced, pushed herself a little longer, smiled a little wider when she caught her father watching. The maid, her name was Sophia, never asked for attention. She adjusted routines gently, turning ordinary moments into quiet training. Standing while brushing teeth. Holding the counter while counting breaths. Celebrating effort, not outcome. One afternoon, Julian returned early again. This time he heard frustration instead of laughter. I can't, Alina cried, tears streaking her cheeks. I was better yesterday. Sophia knelt beside her, voice calm, unshaken. Progress doesn't move in straight lines. Some days teach strength. Some days teach patience. Julian almost intervened. Almost told Sophia to stop. The pain on his daughter's face felt unbearable. But then Alina wiped her tears and whispered, "Let me try one more time." She stood for only a moment, less than before, but her face changed. Defeat vanished. Determination took its place. That night, Julian sat across from Sophia in the kitchen, the grand dining room untouched. You've done more for my daughter than people I've paid fortunes, he admitted quietly. Why? Sophia thought carefully. Because no child should feel broken. The words stayed with him long after she left the room. Later that week, Julian canceled a board meeting for the first time in his career. Instead, he attended Alina's therapy session, not as a sponsor, not as an observer, but as a father holding her hand. Alina looked up at him, surprised. You're not leaving? No, Julian said, his voice steady. I'm learning how to stay. And in that moment, the strongest thing in the room wasn't Alina's legs. It was the family that was finally standing together. The breakthrough didn't happen on a perfect day. It came on a day that began like every other, quiet, slow, and ordinary. Rain tapped softly against the windows as Alina practiced in the living room. Her muscles felt heavy, her patience thin. Julian sat nearby, pretending not to watch, though every movement of hers echoed in his chest. Sophia adjusted a cushion, her voice calm as ever. Today isn't about standing longer, she said gently. It's about trusting yourself. Alina inhaled deeply and pushed up. Her legs shook immediately. She reached for the chair but stopped. I want to try without holding anything, she said. Julian's heart pounded. Alina. Sophia raised her hand not to stop him but to steady the moment. I'm right here, she told Alina. You decide. Seconds passed. Then something extraordinary happened. Alina took one step. It was small. Unsteady. Almost invisible to anyone else. But to Julian it felt like the world had shifted. Alina gasped, her eyes wide, her body swaying before Sophia gently supported her. For a moment no one spoke. Then Alina laughed through tears. Did you see that? She whispered. I moved. Julian crossed the room in 2 strides, dropping to his knees, holding his daughter as if afraid she might vanish. His voice broke. I saw. That night, Julian found Sophia in the kitchen again. You changed my family, he said quietly. Sophia shook her head. No. She changed herself. I just believed her before she could. Julian understood then. Money had built walls around his life. Belief had opened doors. For the first time in years, he slept peacefully, knowing that miracles weren't sudden. They were built one brave step at a time. The morning Alina walked into the garden without her wheelchair, the sky was perfectly clear, as if the world itself was holding its breath. It wasn't fast. It wasn't graceful. Her steps were careful, measured, and supported by a simple walking aid. But she was moving forward on her own, sunlight warming her face. Julian stood near the doorway, unable to speak, afraid that any sound might break the moment. Sophia walked beside Alina, not touching her, just close enough to remind her she wasn't alone. "I'm doing it," Alina whispered, almost in disbelief. "Yes," Sophia said softly. "You are." Tears blurred Julian's vision. He realized that this wasn't just his daughter's victory, it was his. He had learned to stop running, to stop hiding behind work, and to show up when it mattered most. Later that day, Julian made a decision that surprised everyone. He funded a training program for caregivers who learned through real experience, not just certificates. Sophia didn't ask for recognition, but he insisted she lead it. "You gave my daughter her confidence," he told her. "Now help give it to others." Alina hugged Sophia tightly. "You believed in me first." Sophia smiled. "And now you believe in yourself." That evening the mansion felt different. Lighter. Warmer. Filled with laughter instead of echoes. Alina stood by the window, steady on her feet, watching the sun set. Julian stood beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "What do you want to do now?" he asked. Alina smiled, a smile full of courage, hope, and endless possibility. "I want to keep going." And for the first time, Julian knew exactly how to walk beside her.